Right, I'll level with you, I'm dreading this a little bit, but you have crowned us the People's Channel for a reason, and I do pride myself on taking on your ideas, if suggested and liked enough in the comments, so I'm going to give it a go anyway. Now, this is an idea that's been suggested a lot recently, particularly on our Best 11, signed for less than £10 million video. However, most people have requested the Worst 11 signed for over £50 million. That just wasn't feasible, since although transfer fees have gone a bit mental, that's still a fortune, and the centre-backs would have had to have been Aymeric Laporte and Virgil van Dijk, both of whom are brilliant defenders, just because they're the only £50 million plus centre-backs in the world, at least until Lucas Hernandez joins Bayern, if one considers him a centre-back too. So we've lowered the bar to £35 million, but it's still very difficult, and I want to make it clear that some of the players in this 11 are very good, most of them in fact, they just happen to be the worst to have transferred for an enormous amount of money. As with our previous videos, it's only based on the player's most recent transfer, so someone like Fernando Torres or Andy Carroll wouldn't count. Future transfers and pre-arranged deals aren't eligible, although I'm not sure it'd change anything if they were. Here is our worst 11, signed for more than £35 million. Goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga. Only 3 goalkeepers have transferred for over £35 million in the history of the game, namely Kepa Arrizabalaga, Alisson Becker, and Thibaut Courtois. I think most people would agree Alisson is the pick of those 3, although we did get a weird raft of people claiming Courtois was the best goalkeeper in the world on this channel after he had an admittedly very good World Cup. Personally, I don't think there is a fat lot in it between Kepa and Courtois, on the grounds that Courtois has a bit more experience and is a bit more established, and has never refused to leave the field of play in a cup final. We'll go with Kepa as our number 1. There are no prizes for guessing which keeper makes our bench though. Right back, Kyle Walker. Okay, so this is the kind of problem I was talking about. Only 2 right backs have ever transferred for in excess of £35 million, and both are very good fullbacks. Simply on the grounds that I think Joao Cancelo is a more assured right back than Kyle Walker, we have to put Walker in our 11. The Englishman was fantastic in his debut campaign at Man City last season, but he's had a few wobbles in what has been a slightly less comfortable campaign for Pep Guardiola's side this season. Walker has searing pace and offers real purpose down the right flank, but I'd say Cancelo is a little bit more defensively astute, so Walker unfortunately has to come in at right back. Centre back, John Stones. We have a slightly more plentiful choice of 6 centre-backs, but most of them are really excellent footballers. It was a choice between John Stones and Davinson Sanchez here then, oddly both players who I rate really highly. Between the two though, I have to go with Stones, and I think Sanchez could well become one of the most assured centre-backs in the world under Mauricio Pochettino over the next few years. John Stones is a centre-back that plays the game we like to see it played, and despite heavy criticism earlier in his career, his style has served him well. He joined Man City for a potential £50 million in 2016, where he's won the Premier League title, as well as amassing 37 caps for England at the age of 24. I think he's Man City's second best centre-back and a very good player, but still the second worst centre-back signed for over £35 million. Centre-back, Shkodran Mustafi. Whilst choosing his partner was a nasty decision, I don't feel quite so bad about plonking Shkodran Mustafi at the heart of our defence. By far and away the worst centre-back signed for £35 million or more, Mustafi really hasn't helped remedy any of Arsenal's defensive struggles in his first 3 seasons with the club. Arguably the worst signing in Arsenal history, Mustafi looks rash, clumsy, and slow to react to danger. Most Arsenal fans would like to see the World Cup winner sold this summer, but if he is, the Gunners are unlikely to recoup much of the £35 million plus they paid Valencia for him. Left back, Benjamin Mendy. Our left back, it's a choice between Benjamin Mendy and Benjamin Mendy, since Lucas Hernandez's transfer to Bayern Munich hasn't happened yet. So we're going to go with Benjamin Mendy. In fairness, Mendy has actually been a bit of a disaster at £52 million 2 years into his time at the Etihad, and support for him seems to be beginning to wear thin with both Pep Guardiola and the City fans. A magnificent outlet down the left flank when fully fit, Mendy's deliveries into the box caused mayhem, again when fit, but he's only registered 17 Premier League appearances in his first 2 seasons with the club. Now, obviously, it's not Mendy's fault that he has suffered a couple of really serious injuries, such as rupturing his ACL, but his discipline has often been called into question. Whether it's Pep not knowing his whereabouts, or late nights out after returning to training, he hasn't portrayed himself as a model pro. And although we have no choice but to include him, he probably couldn't have too many complaints either way. Holding midfield. JORGINHO. Whilst it was a real struggle to assemble a so-called worst back four for over £35 million, with the obvious exception of Mustafi, we have a plethora of options in holding and central midfield. It was a toss-up between JORGINHO and Nemanja Matic at the base of our midfield, but we have to go with JORGINHO for now. Whilst Matic now looks cumbersome and sluggish in the United midfield, he wasn't bad last season, and it's still possible that he could do an effective job with the right players either side of him. JORGINHO, on the other hand, is really yet to show why Chelsea paid an initial £50 and a potential £57 million to sign him from Napoli. I've been lenient with the Italian, who I think has been a victim of Maurizio Sarri's slightly one-dimensional tactics, but based on his performances since signing for the Blues, he has to feature here. Central midfield. Fred. This won't be a universally popular decision, but I think we still have to include Fred in this 11. The Brazilian recently featured in our video on Manchester United's 7 worst post-Fergie signings, to which lots of Man United fans responded by saying his form had improved over the last couple of months, despite the fact I said exactly that in the video. Fred's form had improved prior to Manchester United defeats to Everton and Man City, although he was really poor in those 2 games, and even in his finest fettle, I don't think he looks like a £52 million player, which is an extraordinary amount of money. There's no doubt in my mind that Fred has the potential to become a good player for Manchester United, especially the way below par Manchester United we're getting used to now. But from what he's shown at Old Trafford so far, he deserves to be included in this 11. Central midfield. JOAO Mario. A bit of a left field shout. I don't think off the top of my head I would have thought of JOAO Mario for this 11, but I guess that's why I had to do research. The Portuguese international joined Inter Milan for a potential €45 million back in 2016, fresh off the back of winning the European Championships as a key man in Portugal's midfield. He looked to be a real workhorse in the Portuguese midfield, but we haven't seen so much of that at the San Siro. Mario looks neat on the ball and in the pass, but neither an all-action box-to-box midfielder nor a particularly inventive or creative midfield playmaker. He's played just 58 games in 3 seasons since that big money move to Inter, including a half season on loan at West Ham, and we don't think he's been effective enough to avoid featuring in this 11. Right wing. RICHARLISON. I can already hear the Everton fans sharpening their pitchforks and heading for either the dislike or unsubscribe buttons, if not both, but don't be so hasty, Toffees fans. RICHARLISON has scored 13 goals and made 1 assist in 33 Premier League games this season, which is a respectable, if not outstanding tally for a player whose time has been split pretty evenly between playing out wide on the right, out wide on the left, and actually most often of all through the middle as a centre forward. Both RICHARLISON and Gylfi Sigurdsson cost Everton in excess of £35 million, with RICHARLISON having clauses which could take his fee to a potential £50 million. With that being said, he has been linked with a move to Manchester United, which will presumably see him transferred for an even larger fee. RICHARLISON is a talented footballer with a bright future ahead of him at 21, but I don't think there are any right wingers worse than him that have transferred for over £35 million, so for that reason, he has to feature. Left wing. Oscar. Another versatile Brazilian who can play on either the left flank, the right flank, or through the middle. It's worth reiterating for the umpteenth time that although these are the worst players signed for over £35 million, most are still very good players. Oscar is one of a number of players to head over to the Chinese Super League in recent years, but what surprised many people was just how young he was when he did so. Oscar was just 25 when he left Chelsea, where he had won 2 Premier League titles, for Shanghai SIPG in a deal worth a reported £60 million. Oscar is a talented footballer, physically fit, positive on the ball, skillful and creative. Some likened him to a poor man's Kaka, but despite his many talents, you'd have to say Chelsea did well to get £60 million for him. Oscar has since bagged 26 goals in 85 games in China as one of the division's marquee signings. Centre forward. Alex Teixeira. It was a choice between 2 Chinese Super League imports as our centre forward, namely Alex Teixeira and Cedric Bakambu. Bakambu is more of an out-and-out centre forward, whereas Teixeira is often played as a false 9 or attacking midfielder, but Bakambu has scored 23 goals in 28 games for Beijing Guoan, so we had to go with Teixeira. Teixeira wasn't the first big-name player to go to the Chinese Super League when he joined Jiangsu Suning in 2016. He was the first player at the peak of their powers to pick a Chinese club over an established European giant in the form of Liverpool. The uncapped Brazilian is a really good dribbler of the ball with an eye for goal, but at 50 million euros, we still think he's our best shout up front in terms of players who cost in excess of £35 million. The team, including substitutes. We normally include our substitutes and the manager here with these kind of 11s, but I'm not sure if there's ever been a managerial fee as expensive as £35 million, so we'll just try to do 7 substitutes. As we alluded to earlier, our substitute goalkeeper is Thibaut Courtois, who I've often considered to be a little overrated, and the Belgian hasn't had the best of debut campaigns at Real Madrid. In the defensive areas, we really don't have much wiggle room. As centre-back, it's either Davinson Sanchez or Thiago Silva, so we'll go for Sanchez, despite the fact I think he's a brilliant young centre-back, and as our benched fullback, Joao Cancelo is literally our only option, so naturally, we're going to include him. It's a little easier in central and defensive midfield, where I'm first going for Nemanja Matic, who cost Manchester United £40 million from Chelsea. The press acted like it was a masterstroke at the time, and that Chelsea were out of their minds to sell him. It hasn't really worked out that way. After a couple of months of claims that he'd taken the shackles off Pogba, the Matic loving began to fade, and he's had a pretty poor second season at Old Trafford. Joining him on the bench was going to be Granit Xhaka, but apparently he cost Arsenal just under £35 million, so we'll go for Paulinho. Paulinho has had a bit of an up and down career, from brilliant at Corinthians to terrible at Tottenham, exile to China, a stunning transfer to Barcelona, and then a return to China. In truth, Paulinho was actually pretty good at Barca, but found himself surplus to requirements following a couple of additions in central midfield. Still, I think he's our best candidate for central midfield on the bench. The next two really could be any of Thomas Lemar, Alvaro Morata, Naby Keita, Gylfi Sigurdsson, Mesut Ozil, Hulk, Vinicius Jr., Juan Mata, Julian Draxler, and Corentin Tolisso. It seems way too harsh to include Vinicius Jr., who was obviously signed for his incredible potential ability, or Corentin Tolisso, who looked very good prior to rupturing his cruciate ligaments in his right knee. With that in mind, and despite his recent goal against his former club, I think I'm going to have to go for Juan Mata, who was absolutely brilliant for a couple of seasons at Chelsea, but hasn't been able to hit those heights at Manchester United, and could potentially be surplus to requirements in the summer. Joining him, I think I'm going to have to go for Hulk, who has always slightly irritated me as such a talented footballer who has never really tested himself in an elite league. He's a bit like a heavyweight boxer who only ever fights flyweights, and we're supposed to be really impressed by his record of 300 bouts and 300 knockouts. He's obviously a real talent, but I think he's more deserving of a place than the likes of Ozil or Morata. To recap, our starting 11 reads like this: Kepa Arrizabalaga, Kyle Walker, John Stones, Shkodran Mustafi, Benjamin Mendy, Jorginho, Fred, Joao Mario, Richarlison, Oscar, and Alex Teixeira, with the bench of Thibaut Courtois, Davinson Sanchez, Joao Cancelo, Nemanja Matic, Paulinho, Juan Mata, and Hulk. That was a really tough and cruel video to put together, featuring some very good players who it seems wrong to include in any worst-based 11, but that's why we're the People's Channel. Thanks for watching, share your outrage with us in the comments, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and obviously subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens if you want to watch world-class football-based content on a daily basis.